Hello, this is Ramesh Kesanupalli. I'm the co-founder of GADI Alliance and founder of FIDO Alliance. Today we're going to talk about trust and accountability that we can bring together with the architecture called GADI, Global Architecture for Digital Identity. The fraud and identity-related fraud is not just limited to the digital world. It's there in the physical world too, on a regular basis. When we visit a bank and we tell them something about us or give them a certificate or give them a employment letter, how do you know if that is accurate information or not? Similarly, in the digital world, when somebody claims something about themselves, how do we know whether that is correct or not? We have to make sure that we have a framework that will bring trustability to both digital and the physical world. This is where GADI comes into picture and the work that the GADI Alliance is trying to do. We have come a long way in the internet where most of our interactions in the digital world are simply credentials/account oriented interactions. Anybody can go register onto something, they can get a credential, it can be a simple user ID password, and those credentials can be used to access their information and get onto the network. That is how we evolved the entire internet infrastructure as of today. If you see the latest trends, what's happening, including the pandemic that we're going through right now, the nature of the business is fastly changing. It has been changing for a long time since internet started exploding, but it's becoming even more relevant now because each one of us are dealing with people whom we may or may not ever meet in our lives. We may be hiring a company to do some of the work remotely from wherever we are without actually knowing something about the company, who is involved. If the company has a legal standing that is correct, how do you trust that entity when we are doing a business with them? Or when we are hiring somebody remotely, how do you know if that's the right person and he is trustworthy and he has the right kind of credentials to what we want him to do? If you see that, and it's only going to go in one direction from now onwards, which is more and more of us will be dealing with people and the entities and the society that we may or may not actually have direct familiarity with. This is where the trust and accountability part comes into picture. In the physical world, we all go through an identity life cycle. That life cycle involves when we were born, for instance. Our identity is not something that is created by us, it is given to us. When we were born, our father and mother, our parents, will actually initiate that identity saying, "This is Ramesh Kesanupalli." When they say that, the doctor comes and says that, certifies that, yes, Ramesh Kesanupalli is born to this parent and the parents' names, and which hospital, what time he was born, what date it was born, which place he was born. And the government comes in and creates a identity certificate, so-called birth certificate, where we acquire our initial identity. That is actually provided to us by a group of trustable people, our parents, the doctor, and the government coming together. Then I take that particular identity document and I go to elementary school and say, "I'm Ramesh Kesanupalli, I want to get admitted into elementary school." Elementary school creates a credential that I'm a student of that particular school and gives it to me. That gets built onto my initial trustable identity that was given to me. Then I take the elementary school to middle school to high school to university to my employment, where more and more credentials get issued and added to my initial identity, and there are more people who will be actually attesting, yeah, this is definitely Ramesh Kesanupalli. That is how my identity got built. And then I take that identity, go get a driver's license with that, go get a passport with that, go buy a car with that, and go buy an apartment or a house with that. All of them in turn issue some kind of credentials document to me saying, I am the owner of that house, I'm owner of the car, I did get that diploma, and I do have this driver's license, I'm permitted to go. All those things are actually issued to my initial trusted identity that I was given. That's part of the reason we have in the real world the trust and accountability that is built in, that actually goes squarely with and collaboration with security and privacy. By that, what I mean is, if I come to some place to meet with some gentleman, I want to assume that that's a secure place, and he wants to assume that it's a secure place. If it is not a secure place, we won't go there. So we take security for granted, and we also take the privacy for granted. By that, what I mean is, when I meet somebody, they might ask me about 50 questions. I have a choice to answer all 50 of them, or if I consider 10 of them, 15 of them are professional, I'll answer. Another 20, 30, if they are personal, I'm going to say, no, I can't answer these questions because these are my personal, private information. So in the real world, the security and privacy are inherently built into the ecosystem. We all have that in the real world, but that is compensated also or strengthened also by trust and accountability. By that, what I mean is, if I claim that I co-founded this or I founded this, etc., you want to believe what I'm trying to say, and you want to trust. That's the benefit of doubt we want to give it to people. We want to trust that. If a week or 10 days later, if we found out that that's a wrong information, I misled, then you want to hold me accountable, where you will come out and say, Ramesh, why did you say that? Or if you meet somebody else, you will actually tell me, yeah, Ramesh mentioned that, but he was really not a founder of that. So the accountability part comes there. Because all these four are balanced together, the physical world is actually functioning properly to a great extent. The digital world should not be anything different. In the GADI architecture, what we actually do is we actually define the architecture in a way where we actually start issuing something called a digital address for every user. The digital address that is created is actually comes and gets issued by one of the issuers. You will not be able to create a digital address. You will only get a digital address / a trust anchor from an issuer who is trying to bring you onto this GADI ecosystem. That's the other difference in what we are trying to do here with the GADI DApp architecture, where you won't be able to create an account on your own in this GADI ecosystem. In GADI ecosystem, you are brought onto the ecosystem. When we designed this GADI DApp, GADI stands for Global Architecture for Digital Identity, and DApp stands for Digital Address Provider. In this new ecosystem that we are trying to bring to the fruition, the way it works is, when a user tries to go to a DMV or a passport office or an employment office or a medical center or a financial institution, when they walk in and try to open an account, create an account, etc., that particular entity actually does the identity verification and does the natural process of identifying the person. That is where you initiate a transaction that is called creation of digital address. When the issuer is trying to create digital address, there is this global architecture, and the GADI, the distributed ledger, acts like the place where the digital address, the trust anchor, initial trust anchor that is created for that user by that issuer only once to bring onto this ecosystem, is actually sent to the GADI ledger and found out if that was created before, an anchor, trust anchor was created for this gentleman before or not. If it is created, then it comes back and says the trust anchor is already created. If it is not, then the ledger will be asked to create the trust anchor, and it will be deposited in that global ledger, the distributed ledger. And then the issuer working with the digital address provider will actually create a digital address that is associated closely with the trust anchor. And the user will be given a FIDO account to control his account that is attached to the digital address provider to be able to actually access, control, disclose the data. Once that digital address is created, any of the issuers can go and issue credential to that user. When a issuer issues a credential to the user, the data that actually belongs to that credential or that user credential is converted and into a encrypted data into a different a GADI agent that is sitting on the issuer's data center, and you will actually go and create a verifiable claim and create DITs for those things. And those are the DITs that are published to the off-ledger service, which is hooked to your FIDO cloud that the user is interacting. And the user now has the first credential that is issued to the digital address on the ledger that is associated with the cloud. And from that moment onwards, user can go to various places where he has different credentials distributed all over the globe. In my case, I went to university in India. Last 30 years, I've been working in the United States. I worked for 5-6 companies. Then I have my driver's license, my home, and my everything here. All those now, the data will still remain where it is. You simply go and, publish those things, the DITs. Keep the data with the source, create the DITs, issue those DITs to the ledger, and the user has the control to the ledger. One of the things that we did when we are actually trying to come up with the GADI DApp architecture, we actually talked about some core principles. If we were to do the identity and trust correctly, digital identity correctly, what should be the base principles? So when we talked about base principles, what we felt was, in this GADI ecosystem, people should be brought onto the ecosystem with a trustable identity anchor that is created for the user as per the GADI algorithms that we are standardizing in GADI Alliance. The digital address provider, whoever is offering the service for the users to interact with this ecosystem, should never own anybody's identity or should not be owning anybody's data. That's the first principle that we had and we have. Second principle that we have is, anytime any disclosures that need to be done, user must always be in the consent chain. If somebody is trying to check my employment status, I should allow that. If somebody is trying to check if I'm living at a certain place, I should consent that before that is disclosed. That is the second principle that we had. Third principle that we had is, data should stay with the issuers. My university, if my diploma is issued by a university, they should keep that diploma and simply provide the ability for me to control that diploma and then disclose the diploma to whoever I want to, whenever I want to, for however period that I want to. So the third principle is, keep the data with the issuers. Do not move there. Do not move. Do not consolidate. Do not try to, you copy anywhere. And the fourth principle that we had was, because issuers are the core key people who are actually providing you more and more and more in identity as you go, let them be part of the value chain. Every time when somebody checks my university, when somebody checks my employment status, when somebody checks my paycheck, I don't want some third party to get benefit out of that. I would like the issuers who are providing the information to come back and be the part of the chain. That's the fourth principle that we had. Fifth principle that we had was, when we are designing the system, let's not go and focus and provide another way of a digital identity for the people who are technologically savvy and for the people who have a smartphone. We wanted to make sure we include everybody. The people who do not have a presentable identity, as we all know, there are close to 20% of the people, 25% of the people that in the globe that do not have a presentable identity. How do you bring people onto the network? How do you bring them onto the value chain? If you see most of the governmental benefits, the refugee camps, people who get affected by the disasters and all, they really don't have IDs that they can present right away. So we want to make sure when we are trying to fix this problem and define the architecture, let's not restrict ourselves to smartphone users. Let's go and include everybody in the world. These are the 5 core principles based on which we define the architecture for GADI and the DAP, Digital Address Provider. In this framework, what happens is every country has a citizen identity program and a digital identity program. Unfortunately, most of those things are completely geo-dependent on local only. A citizen identity card that is issued in Korea, if that gentleman comes to United States, there is no way to actually check if that citizen identity number belongs to a particular person or not. There is no way. And it's not even sure that an entity in the United States is going to actually trust the document. How do you provide this trust framework? How do you make sure, just like a telephone, where somebody in Korean telecom can call somebody in AT&T network in USA, and in the background, everything is taken care. Similarly, with respect to identity, identity is a global problem. Identity is a very critical problem. Identity, if it is not cross-system oriented, if it is not a framework that can be trusted at a global scale, you really don't have right kind of identity ecosystem. So what GADI is trying to do here is to make sure we define this global trustable identity framework where when a issuer or a service provider in Korea comes onto the GADI ecosystem, those people are brought onto the GADI ecosystem through a digital address provider. In USA, if there are few issuers and few service providers who come onto the GADI ecosystem through a DApp locally, if these two DApps are connected through the GADI ledger, now an issuer from in Korea, a document comes from there to United States, somebody presents it in USA, now you can actually check right from the source if this citizen identity card really belongs to somebody in Korea and the document is actually issued by a Korean trusted issuing party, that is Korean government. You can real-time check that and then you create a mutual cooperation of the global population to come together. Obviously, we are trying to make sure the specification is done correctly, and we have the demos that you can go visit our DID Alliance website. We are actually, we have a much briefer introduction and a demo video that we released a white paper with last month, September 9th. You guys can go and watch that if you need more detail on this one. We now are wanting to invite more and more people globally to come and participate in the DID Alliance working groups. Contribute your use cases to the ecosystem that we are trying to bring to the table. Come and influence spec. We can only influence the spec if we have more people coming from diverse backgrounds. This is not something that can be done by a one community, one country, one company. This has to be a global effort. We all have to come together and you create a trustable ecosystem where whether it is physical world or it is digital world, you can actually make sure we can trust what we are being presented. This is a very critical effort. We welcome all the participation from you guys, particularly in Korea. There is so much government support for this one, and Korea would be a great place to start to bring various identity systems that do not talk to each other to a common backbone where you can trust everybody from different ecosystems, different identity systems. Then slowly set an example where Korea will be the showcase for rest of the world in showing how a digital identity should be done. It should be done right. This should be done clearly. This should be done only once. And once we do that, we don't have to go back and look into it. I thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.